Let's talk about supporting and stiffening a concrete bending project. Currently, I have a slab that's 20 feet wide and 10 feet tall. And normally when you first create a project, you'll have something that looks like this, and over in the model status, you'll have model errors. And if you hold your mouse over model errors, you'll see it's saying no supports. So obviously my slab is free to fly, and I've got to support it. So how do I do that? I do that by switching to the boundary and support ribbon. And in the ribbon, we have three items that apply. I can place point supports, I can draw line supports, and I can draw beams or in-plane stiffeners. Let's look at the point supports. If I click on that in the ribbon, I can now go onto my slab and just click my mouse and place supports. So I'm going to do that in three locations. I hit the escape key. And one thing to note, when I draw support, I have this green perimeter boundary showing. What is that? That represents the punching perimeter for this support. So punching shear checks will be made along that boundary. Now, how does it figure that out? To do that, we have to have a shape to start out with. So if I click on my point support and look over in the inspector, I have its location and its name, but also I have a shape type. Currently that's set to square. I can switch that to a rectangle, a circle, or even an I shape. Let's switch it to an I shape, and you'll notice the shape has changed. I can also specify parameters for the I shape, like how high it is and how wide it is. Let's suppose this is a 12-inch or 1 foot I shape by 6 inches wide, and you'll notice the shape changes as well as the punching perimeter. In addition to the shape type, I can define whether I'm going to support the slab or wall at that location for force Z, or force out of the plane, as well as moment about the two axes. So if this support is able to generate a moment, I can leave those as fixed. So I can specify the point support in that manner. In addition to point supports, I can draw line supports, and I'll go ahead and select that now in the ribbon, and I'll draw a line across my project. And when I do that, you'll see I have drawn a line object with a green boundary. And again, the green boundary represents the punching perimeter of this line support. If I look over in the inspector, I can specify the thickness of the line support or wall, as well as whether it's a fixed support, a pin support, or if it's a spring support, how stiff it'll be for holding a flexural moment about the line support. I'll switch that back to fixed. So that represents a line support. A line support, if you're designing a slab or an elevated slab, would really effectively be a wall along that boundary. If you're looking at designing a wall for, say, lateral earth or pressure loads, the line support would probably be used for an intersecting wall to support the perimeter of a boundary. A typical tank, for example, would have a line support along the two vertical boundaries and a line support across the base. So that's how we specify line supports. The final thing to talk about is to draw beams on our cross-section. Beams are effectively in-plane stiffened elements. In the case of a suspended slab, this would represent a beam along a boundary. Many times the beam will be spanning between point supports. So I can draw one as is seen here. So that's how I create a beam. A beam has the option of specifying its depth, how far it extends above or below the slab, as well as how wide it is, and then how it's offset vertically. Currently, I've set my beam with a vertical offset with top flush. Let's rotate this model around a little bit and get a three-dimensional view of our structure, and I'm going to rotate it around to where we can look at the back side of that particular beam we just created. And looking at it from the back, we'll go ahead and turn the drawing grid off. Looking at it from the back, we see that our selected beam is more or less flush on top with the bottom extending 1 foot. If I switch this beam over in the inspector from being top flush to, say, centered, I'm going to get a 1 foot extension above and below. And lastly, if I make it bottom flush the beam is extending above, and if we look from the bottom, we'll see it's flush. So that represents how we define a beam or stiffener in our model.